Welcome to 3-Night Weekend, where we prepare you for the weekend to come with the help of gaming industry luminaries. I'm Shane Satterfield, and you can find me on the world's most advanced gaming website, SIFTD, at sifted.net, or on Twitter at Dinfire. If you want to support the show, head to patreon.com/sifted. The show goes live every Friday for our patrons, and the following Monday for everyone else. This week, we're talking with Victor Lucas. He launched his first gaming website in 1995, and his first gaming TV show in 1997, before moving on to networks like G4 and syndication all across North America. And he did it all from the Great White North in Canada. He's a pioneer and a trailblazer who has managed to stay relevant for decades. All right, here we are with the person I consider the godfather of video game television, Victor Lucas. Now, you've not just done this in the US, you're actually from Canada, which makes what you've done throughout your career even more amazing. Victor, welcome to 3-Night Weekend.
Thank you, Shane. It's awesome to be here on a show with you. I think this is the first time we've ever collaborated on anything like that. I mean, we've definitely run into each other all over the place, and we've had lots of great conversations, but I don't think we've done a show together.
Well, Victor, a big problem is that you've always been like the on-camera guy, the upfront guy. Different parts of my career, I've been that, but then I would go and just be like a producer or just an editorial guy. When we first kind of knew each other, we were both working at G4. Well, you were producing Judgment Day for G4. I was working on X-Play as the editorial guy, kind of for the whole network. And so we knew each other tangentially. And then I went to Game Trailers, and that's where we started like really getting to know each other at various review events, which don't even exist anymore. But all the big games, you and I would get together after we play it and have a drink and just kind of sit and talk about the industry, things that were going on, particularly related to sort of television, gaming television, and video production inside the industry, because that's a thing that you and I have always had in common from day one. So being from Canada, which I think for a lot of American gamers, they don't really understand what it was like maybe growing up being a gamer in Canada. Did you guys get like all the same consoles? Like, did you get like the Atari 2600 and the Intellivision and the ColecoVision? And were you getting all those consoles like the same time we were getting them here in the US?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the benefits of, living in Canada and growing up in Canada, we have socialized medicine and socialized education.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those are really beneficial in terms of giving everybody kind of an even footing economically and giving you social skills, integrating into the community. And there's also this built-in kind of politeness that Canada is famous for, and that's a real thing. So the
stereotypes are true? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
but I'd agree with you. I know a lot of Canadians. I play hockey with a lot of them, or I did before all this insanity happened with the pandemic, and they are literally the nicest people that I know in my life. I mean,
so it's a good setup to, because it's a good place to be from, and I am very grateful for that. My mom moved us from the east coast of Canada, from Ontario to Vancouver, BC, which was kind of like the frontier of Canada. It's kind of, it's a big city in the grand scope of things, but I grew up in the 80s, and it certainly wasn't the size and scale that it is now. It wasn't quite the Hollywood North that it is now, and famous for its skiing and for all of the celebrities that come through here. So it was very idyllic to grow up here, and video games enthralled me right from the beginning. I was just blown away by, entertainment in general. Star Wars was incredibly influential for me, and Superman the movie, and Indiana Jones, and the Alien movie, like all of that stuff.
Sound like an American 80s kid to me.
Yeah, I mean, we're all coming up with the same thing. And that's the other side of that, is that we get this kind of, social grounding living in Canada, but we also get the incredible media that permeates from America. We get all the American stations. They were all across all of our cable packages, and with rabbit ears, we could get all the Washington stations as well. And so we got this kind of pop culture dunk, but it wasn't quite as dog eat dog as I think a lot of American cities can be, and quite as aggressive. And so, I got all of the education and all the perks of what was happening in entertainment in the US, but I also, I think I have a collaborative nature, as many Canadians do. Like, it's built in me to kind of find a way to work with people. And I think that helped me quite a bit when I was having conversations with broadcasters
Hmm.
and sponsored partners. And quite funnily enough, funnily enough, I don't know if funnily is a word, but
I like it.
funny enough, I we actually needed we got American broadcasters to sign on with Electric Playground first in the 90s, in the mid 90s, and because we got American broadcasters that wanted the show, we were able to loop in Canadian broadcasters
Hmm.
because they would say, "Well, wait, you guys are selling the show into Canada already? Oh my god, okay, oh yeah, we'll take it," and then they
Uh-huh.
would have a contract prepared for us, and so we actually had a U.S. placement in syndication in a bunch of different stations down the west coast of the U.S. Prior to us locking down a national string of stations in Canada. And I think it was just, uh, you know, I I was an actor before this, and I
But
was a
you were.
waiter.
Let's
Yeah.
talk about how you got into games. So,
Okay.
what did you go to? Did you go to college? Did you?
Yeah, I went to the University of Victoria in Victoria, BC, in Canada here, and I took theater as my major,
Okay.
and then I took English as my minor, and I was thinking
That's
about
the perfect
potential.
combo for what you ended up doing.
Yeah, and I didn't quite know that
Yeah, at the
because
time.
I really focused on acting, and I actually
Hmm.
got in trouble while I was in the theater department there because I was acting all the time. I was in a lot of scenes, and a lot of the fourth year students in the theater department were also directing their own little movies and their own stage stuff, and they kept casting me in things. It was incredibly um, gratifying and flattering to be kind of in demand as an actor. As you know, I just had started in theater there at the university. But you're supposed to really sort of soak it all up. You're supposed to go in and learn about costume and
Hmm.
stagecraft, and I didn't give that much attention. And I got some admonishment. Some people got a little bit angry with me that I didn't do that. And But I did fine. I just rushed through all of that work. But then I really decided that I wanted to focus on acting. So I went to a different school, which was just an acting school, and did some theater. And I got work before I graduated. I was in an episode of an old cowboy show called Border Town. I got a stage play that became a movie with the same director and lead actor in the film, but I didn't get the film, but I got the play, and so I was making money, and I was part of the union, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be an actor forever. And while I was acting, I found my way back to games, which had been always something that I loved when I was a kid, but I had kind of moved away from as I'd gone to school and studied
Hmm.
different things. And I actually was on a tour across BC and a lot of Canada, across British Columbia and a lot of Canada, in this children's theater tour. And I just loaded up on Game Boy and Atari Lynx and Game Gear games that I was playing in the tour van all over the country. And I think that was
Was
I
that the
guess my
spark?
way back in. Well, I'd already had it. In the 80s, I spent all my paper route money on video games. I used to had everything: Atari 2600, the ColecoVision, the Atari computers. I had a Vectrex. You can see the Vectrex that I bought when I was a kid back then. I've just always been fascinated by them, and I used to read Antic and Video Games Magazine and all
Now,
of
did you
the
get
80s,
like EGM and magazines like that up in Canada? Did they make
all
it
of
up
them.
there? Okay.
Oh yeah, all of them. And honestly, that was my education of the people too,
Uh-huh.
and when I trace back, I mean, that was the impetus for Electric Playgrounds. I wanted to put the people that were making these things on camera, because I felt like the world didn't know them at all, and there was just such a great mystery about how video games were made, and that's what EP was all about right from the beginning. But I loved them as a kid. I took a little bit of a break as I went through, sort of work, and I was in school a bit, and then I came back as an actor. And I used to use video games and make my acting teachers laugh. That I would pull emotion from how I was playing these games into scenes and to things that I
Interesting.
would do, and I'd be super angry, and they'd say, "Well, where did you get that?" Well, so I was playing something last night, and I just couldn't beat this boss, and it was just driving me crazy, and
That's great.
I channeled that.
Uh-huh.
And so it was a great kind of, I guess, a marriage of everything. But had I known when I was in theater school and university that I was going to become a producer and I was going to be in charge of a team of people and focused on all the minutia as you have been, I might have taken all of the behind the
You
scenes
might
stuff a
have
little bit
focused
more
on some of
seriously.
the other stuff a little
Yeah.
more, right?
Oh, and you know what's funny is I made a conscious decision to kind of move away from acting after speaking with a lot of veteran actors that I became friends with. It's a great community,
Hmm.
but they talked about being vagabonds and never having a home and always
Right.
traveling, and
Hmm.
that just seemed like, oh, that's going to be nerve wracking. And of course, I ended up traveling 6 months out of the year for Electric Playground.
But at least you're always going to like San Francisco and LA or whatever.
No, I mean, one of the beautiful things, we went all over the damn world. My wife and I got married in Venice, Italy, because we were
Wow.
traveling to Europe for
Assassin's Creed or whatever. Yeah.
well, actually
Well, back then it was
we
probably
spent
something else, but
yeah, we spent the money to get out there. It was
hmm.
part of the production budget on the show. We wanted to go where stuff was made, so we would go to Guildford and talk to Peter Molyneux, and
Oh, got you.
and we visited David Cage. I forget the name of his company.
I
The
mean,
guy
it's
that
not fair to say it was just LA and San Francisco because in the early part of my career, I literally traveled the world, all
Yeah,
over
you're
Europe,
everywhere.
all over
Yeah, I was
different.
in Montreal all the time. I was in
Yeah,
Montreal as often as I was
everybody
in
was.
Montreal. Yeah, it's as far away as any place.
Yeah,
It's a long distance away from Vancouver, and I loved all of that. I mean, that, and I still do. It's an incredible privilege to
it is. Yeah.
fly to Japan and interview developers
It did
and get
wear
to know
me
a
out
bunch of
after a
people.
while. I did it like hardcore, like the first
Yep.
3 years of my career, where I was because the guys who were my senior, they had already burned out on it. And so
Yeah.
they're like, here's the new guy who hasn't been everywhere 5 or 10 times already. And he probably wants to
Yeah.
go. And they were right. I did want to go to all those places.
You have to. Yes.
And so, going the first time I ever went to Europe, it was for work. I was like, wow, I'm in freaking London because I'm working at GameSpot. It takes a while for it to wear off, but after a while, it does, I think, eventually start to wear off.
Well,
And
you tell me if this was true for you. Isn't it a total treat to share that with people that you hire, right? And
oh,
then
absolutely, to be able to
you
pass it
give the
down.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I
But then
didn't,
you do get some
none of,
people who don't want to do it, who are like homebodies and they hate it. Like I've
yeah.
had employees that are like, I don't really want to go to Europe. And I'm like, what? Are you
we
crazy?
had we had a cameraman once that kind of got really pissed. My wife and I were traveling because my wife has helped me through all of this. We've been together for 30 years at this point, and
Uh-huh.
there would be no EP without my wife.
Yep.
And she's helped me run the business and all of it. But we were traveling with our cameraman, and we were having a great time. But he had just had enough because he was
Mhm.
like a couple weeks ago. He had been in Stockholm, and he was
He
just
came
like,
home
"Oh
for
my
two
god,
days, barely got over the
yeah,
jet lag, and then headed back to like Germany or yeah.
yeah,
It can
yeah."
be
And
tough. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And a lot of times you don't get to see the city. That's the problem. It's like you see
true,
the
true,
airport and you see the drive from the airport to whatever hotel that you go to. And then that's it.
absolutely,
And
yeah.
so after a while it does start to wear out, but you don't want to sound ingrateful. Like I'm still flabbergasted at the places I got to see just
Well,
because
aren't
I
you
worked with
hanging
them.
on all of that now? In this year of COVID, like my wife and I talk about this all the time. Thanks to this crazy adventure, we have these memories of all of these
Yes.
locations. And my daughter, who's 9, she's been to New York a few times, and
Yep.
London and Paris, and we went to the Cannes film, or with it was MIPCOM, so we went to Cannes to interview TV creators. Because that's the other
Yeah.
thing too, is that right from the get-go, I called it Electric Playground. So the heart and soul of it has always been video games. But I love this notion of pairing video games with other kinds of entertainment and other kinds of subjects, because
Yeah.
I feel like it lifts all the boats, and
Yeah.
it puts
It does.
it puts games right beside the MCU or whatever, crazy electric vehicle might be getting made, or whatever Apple
He
or
was smart
Samsung
about
have got up their
choosing the
sleeve.
name too, because it's not tied directly to video games. It's like
Yeah, I
sifted.
want
Like I could have called like my website like video game sifter or whatever, but
yeah,
I had bigger plans than that. I want Sifted to become a network that starts sifting content from entertainment and sports and politics and all that. So if you aim a
wonderful.
little bit higher, it's always better to be a little bit more general when you start to name stuff. And then so
Totally.
you started Electric Playground, the website in 95, right?
Yeah. Yep. We launched in 1995,
And was
and
it just all just print and stuff like that for the first couple years?
We had, very simplistic little GIFs, little tiny graphics. It was a gray background.
Yeah.
When we first launched, there were no backgrounds.
Yep.
I can't even remember the name of it was a Mozilla. I can't remember the browsers or whatever.
GeoCities, and there was like Netscape and all these crappy
Yeah, it was
browser things.
Netscape. Yeah. And so I was programming HTML and sticking all the stuff in, trying to figure out how to do all of that stuff.
Hmm.
I made a bunch of animated GIFs. I actually made the website. I've told this a couple of times, but I made the website for ASC Games. They used to be a publisher in the video game
Yeah.
industry. They made a game called One. We did a contract with them, and I actually did all of the
Built their
artwork.
website.
I built their website, yeah. Which I wasn't a programmer. I didn't have like training for that.
Dreamweaver and a dream.
Yeah, there were no Dreamweavers back then. It was all from just.
I built my
code.
first site
Yeah.
in '97 with Dreamweaver. And it
Oh,
was
that's
basically
hilarious.
just like Photoshop, but building a website. And it just handled like all the HTML code like under the hood for you.
Oh,
You just
this
like
is
move stuff
pre that.
around with a cursor. And yeah, you were even ahead of me. Like, and I mean, electricplay.com, that might have been one of the first like 3 or 4 gaming websites in the world, Victor. Like,
Yeah, I think it was, and Happy Puppy, I think, was the big
Yep.
one back then.
and IGN showed up. Nintendo had like its own website, but it was like a BBS board, basically just a
Yeah.
place where you could go and post stuff. Like back then, you click on a link and you'd watch the images slowly appear on the web page.
Totally.
Like it's amazing that we fought through all that stuff to build websites. Because I launched mine in '97, and at that point, there were probably 6 gaming websites that were on the
Yeah.
internet. And IGN had launched at that point, but there weren't many.
You know what's crazy? Yeah, like we went to the first E3 in 1995, and I think if I look back at touchstones and milestones for EP, that really solidified. That really kind of gave me the impetus, and it was a choice because I had a production company in Vancouver that wanted to partner with me on Electric Playground, and they were going to help shop it and find partners, broadcast partners, but they wanted like 50 or 60% stake in the property, and they wanted me to pay them to show how serious I was about working with them. and so, which is understand. I mean, it's kind of douchebaggy, but it's understandable if you feel like you've got the clout and you
Right.
want some.
And you can
I'd
make their
never
business
produced
happen.
anything.
Right.
Yeah, but I said nope, and I spent that money on us going to E3. And we shot like crazy and interviewed all kinds of people. But what's nuts is that in '95, we actually posted videos of those interviews on our website.
That's
so
crazy.
They took forever, and they were postage stamp size, but you could watch, I met John Tobias and Ed Boon then and talked to them about Mortal Kombat on the Super Nintendo.
I mean, you may have some of the only video footage of E3 '95, the first E3. Literally.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
the
we had
only
a real
in
broadcast
the
team
world.
for hours running around, and it was amazing. It was incredible.
My first E3 was the one
I have
in
the
Atlanta.
best archive on earth, Shane. I'm convinced of it in this space.
I bet you do.
And what drives me crazy is the apathy that I constantly encounter from people that should know better.
Yeah.
And I have lots of discussions with people that are wanting to build networks and want to go big with, and it drives me nuts. And that's, honestly, that's why I just say, I go down the road a little bit, and then I just say, well, now I can create the content I want to create and put it out there.
You should start publishing some of that stuff. Make sure you're watermarking it so people can't snag it. Because
I guess we should be
you're
doing
the
that,
only
yeah.
archive. Like maybe even launch like a new channel that's like EP Retro or something like that.
You know what I want to do is partner with a group that can really
do it justice.
Because it's work, and people ask me to post all the stuff all the time. It's legwork. I don't want to just throw it up there. I want to have it all database properly. I want to be able to have people search for specific locations and companies and people. I want to integrate it into new material, but that's the other side too, man. Like, I don't want to just be thought of as somebody that made stuff before. I like making new things.
Yep.
And I look at what's out there, and I think there's tons of room for the way that I make things, Yep. And I also keep hearing that people don't want TV on the web, and they want stuff that's whatever. But everybody's just trying to reverse engineer television and find a way to get as close to TV as they can afford and put on the web and
without the
and
kids
on
thinking
YouTube.
that it's linear television.
Yeah, but it is.
It's almost like there's a backlash against production values online.
A little bit, and I get it a bit.
It's almost like
but
the more dirty it looks, the more people like it. It's
Well,
kind
then
of
you look at somebody
strange.
like Cape MKHB, and some of the and even Linus Tech Tips. They spend a fortune on some of their content, and they've bought a
They've
lot
done
of
well. But you look
yeah,
at
they've
like
bought a
something
lot
like
of
No Clip, their production values are great. And they do
yeah,
fine, but
yeah,
it's like one of their videos does 60,000 views, and then here's some dude that just played Zelda with one arm behind his back and it does 8 million views. Like,
yeah,
and it's like he has videos down in the corner this big, like the size of a postage stamp, and like the videos like poorly, captured, and it just doesn't matter. It's an interesting landscape that we're in, but we'll get to all that. So you
yeah,
launched the TV show in '97, which is just insane. Like,
yeah.
because I ended up going to GameSpot in 2000 out of college. It was my first job. Moved out to San Francisco, and at GameSpot we were like supposedly we were like we were driving trailblazing video coverage for games, and like our video reviews were like me sitting in front of a camera for like 30 minutes talking about a game just off the top of my head. Like I had
Yeah.
bullet points and I was just like, this is what I remember from these bullet points, and there was no structure to them. The B-roll was just random B-roll running, but at the time, like that was the cutting edge stuff. Meanwhile, up in Canada, you had been making a TV show for like 3 years already.
Yeah.
How did
Yeah,
you
we
how did you do that? And how did you get it like on television in 1997? That's crazy.
Well, you know what I did is I had, I'm pretty good at making a logical argument for something. I've
Okay.
always had that ability to kind of sit down with people and I pull myself out of the conversation and try to figure out how to make something work.
Or
And
figure
also
out how to tell them what they want to hear.
a little bit, I can
Yeah.
think back to, my school age years, and I didn't really struggle through it. And I watched my brother have a lot of issues and some of my friends, but it just
Mhm.
felt like if you're just reasonable, and I think that's what it is. I just like be reasonable with people and have a little bit of understanding of what they want. And honestly, that's what I would say to anybody that's pitching anything is just, really question what you can do for them because you're going to be solving a problem, right?
Mhm.
And so I just went and had discussions with broadcasters and different potential production partners, and nobody knew anything about this space, And I was very clear, it was very clear to me that it was, you know, this interesting environment, but it hadn't been tapped into, and that was the opportunity. And that opportunity, frankly, still exists, and people are still freaked out and shocked about how to access this kind of information or present this kind of information, which is shocking to me 25 years later, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But I would just, I'd run them through the size economically of the business. I would say there are 20 different monthly magazines covering video games right now that you can walk into a store and pick up. They're basically television programs about every other thing that people are into, but there is
Mhm.
nothing really diving deep into this. There were examples of shows that we could point to that really didn't do the industry justice, really didn't go into the details or the minutia of how this wonderful art form was coming to be.
Mhm.
And I honestly, I think I was as reasonable as I could be to say, look, there's a concept here that fuses Entertainment Tonight, which was an incredibly successful, continues to be a successful magazine format television property,
Mhm.
and Siskel and Ebert, which was the
Yep.
biggest movie review thing. Let's fuse those things into a program that takes people inside the world of games and objectively and honestly uh,
It
from
just
from
seems
an entertaining
crazy, Vic,
perspective.
because at that point, 1997, the
Yeah.
PlayStation had just launched. So
Well,
we hadn't
that's what
had
I
this
was using.
we
I
hadn't
was
had
using the PlayStation.
right, but we hadn't had the great awakening yet, where
Mm.
suddenly it became socially acceptable for people over the age of 15 to play video games.
Well,
Suddenly,
Shane, I'll tell
with
you
the
this, brother.
PlayStation, there were M-rated games, there were games that adults only
Yes.
were supposed to play, and
Well,
you
and that
managed
was
to
part of
sell
it too.
this
Yeah,
before
well,
the
that was part of it because I would walk into rooms and people that weren't buying those magazines every month had this very clear idea in their mind that video games were sprite based and 2D and everything kind of looked similar.
Mhm.
And we kind of had hit a ceiling and saturated the market with games that had a fidelity that was, now we can appreciate a lot more of the artistry in
Sure.
retrospect. But back
Mhm.
then it felt like,
It was
okay,
played
we're
out. Yeah.
yeah, we'd seen a lot of that. when the PlayStation was launching and the Saturn was launching and the N64 was coming, that was the artwork that I presented. I said, look, we're going to be playing games that are going to approach what people are going to the movie theaters to watch a Pixar film. We're going to be playing stuff that is fully three-dimensional. We're going to be able to walk in every kind of direction that we want. We're going to have all kinds of new mobility, and there's going to be a real artistry to the stories that they're going to tell. There should be television programming that it works with this footage and these people and presents these stories. And people heard that, and they saw the numbers, and they saw the magazine covers and all of that information. They liked the brand. They liked the pitch. They liked the people that I was presenting them, and we were able to do it. And our batting average was pretty good. We not only were able to bring in broadcasters, but also sponsors, which were incredibly important back then as well. Yeah. And what was cool, one of our stations was KBHK in San Francisco, and I still have the TV guide. It has Drew Carey on the cover. He was doing the Drew Carey show of the first episode when it aired in that market, and it rated really well, and they were very happy with it. And I feel like which it was like a UPN affiliate back then, but I feel like a lot of the video game industry tuned in because we'd already been on the road. We'd already been shooting a lot of stuff.
Because right around then, 1999, 2000, you have the launch of Tech TV, and you have GameSpot TV, which is a TV style show being produced at Ziff Davis. And then you have sort of really the real birth of the big websites of GameSpot, of IGN. And then you finally have on Tech TV, I would argue, the first real US based gaming TV show, which is Extended Play with Adam Sessler as the host. And that's when everything kind of broke, but that's 2000 in the US. You were doing this in 1997, Vic. Like, that's amazing, man. Like, I don't know if you even really understand how big of a deal it is, what you did.
Well, I did, and I do, but I feel like I did what I was supposed to do. I remember
it was a natural progression for you because you started so damn early in 95.
It
took me 2 years to get this going. Like, man, I'm dragging my feet here.
And honestly, like, I didn't go to high school reunions. I stopped talking about this thing. Like, for me, it took forever for the concept to go. And honestly, I was in my 20s. I was like 27. And I was really worried about being a guy that wanted to act and was still in waitering, not that either of those professions or those pursuits are something to be ashamed of, but I wanted to have, some control over what my future and my destiny was going to be. And so I wrote down 100 different ideas for businesses. And what I came back to was that there is an absence here for programming that would have, because I used to watch this terrible show in Canada called Video and Arcade Top 10, which was basically an infomercial for whatever Nintendo was hawking, that month. And they'd have kids playing games together. And I think this is just punishing. This can't be the state of how games are, talked about in media. And I knew that absence was an opportunity. And so, it was from my perspective, it was a long pursuit. I was in the restaurant. Game Informer did an article on us in like 1996 on the demo that we had put together, and I'd posted it up on the bulletin board in our restaurant. And I was spending all my time and all my money on trying to, and while my wife paid the bills and just took care of everything, I was trying to do everything I could to make this thing a reality. And it finally did become that in 1997. And I remember walking home because I didn't make any money. It took many seasons of the show before I actually started to make any money of, any real money. But I remember walking home when the show had aired, and I walked from downtown and I crossed a bridge to go home to where I lived. And I was just crossing the bridge, and I just looked around the city and I went, holy shit, man, I got a show on television. How did that happen?
It's crazy.
And I never have lost that appreciation or that gratefulness that I still have it. That people give a crap about anything that I have to say is incredibly kind. And I
feel the same way. Just this kid from Little Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and that anyone cares about what I have to say about video games. Every single person matters. Like, it really does. And then from there, you started built you Electric Playground became big and it kept running, and then you had a section inside the show called Reviews on the Run.
Yep.
And then you kind of broke that out into its own show, which
Yep.
then was picked up by G4 and renamed to Judgment Day.
There's a big story in there, and I hate to you take so much of the time here. I feel like talk about me.
There's so much to talk about. I mean, that's why we're here. We're here to talk about you.
Well, this is a crazy story. Okay, so before G4, we had a great partnership with Discovery Science, and that was a relationship that we built through a initial pitch meeting at the NatP television show, which is honestly where I secured a couple of other broadcasters as well. It's a big convention where it's like E3 for TV shows. And we had met with Discovery, and they really liked the pitch, and they thought, okay, well, here's a cool slant for a show that's going to take people into the fusion of science and art, which fits within the purview of this science kind of brand that they had. And it took a little bit of going back and forth. It took about a year to put that deal together, but we launched on Discovery Science in 2001. And this is when Discovery was really branching out. They had the military channel, a bunch of other things. We did some stuff with the military channel too, but they really liked EP. They thought it was a really fun show. They played it Friday nights, and we had good viewership. That was when they focus tested the show, and they wanted me to be in the show more, which is something that I hadn't really considered for myself. I really thought that the stars were the developers that we were interviewing. And then
we had Tommy Tallarico on the show a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that he had to drag you out in front of the camera.
Yeah, well, I got the focus test from the network, and Tommy totally agreed with it. And so in season 6, which was our first season, up until then, I'm not in the show all that much. But then in season 7, I started co-hosting with Tommy because people like the repartee and the back and forth that we would have.
You guys are a great combo. You were the straight guy to Tommy's insanity.
We both love working with each other. We know our roles we know what our roles are, and we know what our true identities are in that space. And
what was that like working with Tommy? And I talked to Tommy about this as well, and we already got his perspective on it. But what was it like? Because I was working editorial at G4 on X-Play, and I shared this with Tommy as well. A lot of times I was getting blamed for Tommy's reviews. I was the visible editorial person working at G4, and a lot of people just assumed that his opinions were a part of X-Play or a part of G4 in general. And so a lot of times we had to answer for his reviews and his review scores, which, I think some people would say we're kind of out there compared to what people were seeing on X-Play or they were seeing on GameSpot or IGN at the time. He had his own way of looking at games. And I think that's what made the show work, because you were sort of the more traditional guy who looked at games the same way that X-Play did or GameSpot or IGN. Tommy was kind of the guy who just kind of looked at a game and was like, I like that or I don't like it, and just kind of had more knee-jerk reactions maybe to games than more of a thoughtful reaction. What was that like, kind of working with someone else who had such differing opinions than you on games?
Well, it's a bunch of things. First of all, it was frustrating and maddening sometimes, just as working with,
because you can see it. You would let it go on camera. And I think that's what made the show great, was watching your reaction sometimes to his opinions on games that you obviously were not in agreement with.
But here's what I understood then, and more and more understand more fully now, is that Tommy had this really cool perspective on the way that he looked at video games because he made them. And he didn't review the game with any kind of sense of awe. There was not this extra layer of like, oh, the magic is here.
Right.
He always reviewed them with a real understanding of the mechanics and the know-how that went into them. And so none of the stuff that I think can cloud us as journalists and as fans, people that have never made games but love them. He didn't have that. He had the insider's perspective on that. But I also really understood and appreciated that there are a lot of people that play games casually, and they play them to escape stuff for a little while. They don't play 80 hours of a JRPG. They wouldn't suffer the intricacies of Knights of the Old Republic.
Right.
And Tommy spoke to those folks.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
That is a mainstream kind of way to think about how to build your content. And it was a real eye-opening kind of an awareness thing for me as we started to grow the programming, that's what we're supposed to do with the show, is appeal to as many people as
Yep.
possible, not just focus in on, what we all, in our community kind of agree on, but to bring people in. And so
Yep.
people, and that's what I did when Reviews on the Run eventually went daily, is I looked to put teams together that had a great relationship but had their own perspectives. And I really understood that every individual that was going to be on the show reviewing content was going to find their own, they're not just fans, but people that kind of identified with their tastes and their
Right.
choices. And I kept really kind of,
It's kind of like the review crew on EGM, where they'd have
yeah,
like one guy who wrote the big review, and then they'd give like a blurb to 3 other people who maybe didn't
yeah,
play the whole game, but they played a
yes,
good bit of it. And they're like,
right.
this is in one paragraph what I think about the game. And a lot of times it clashed with the guy who wrote the main review in EGM.
It's so important,
Yeah.
and I got that feedback all the time from viewers out there. People would
Hmm.
have their own favorite team or their own favorite reviewer. And, it's really about sort of connecting with that identity. And I used to have real discussions with the reviewers. It's like, we don't really want to know how you play these games. We can get that information quite easily, just
Hmm.
by looking at the footage, you can kind of understand it. What we want to know is emotionally how you felt when you played these games. And because people endeavored to put that into the work, and I put their faces in front of the camera, which I think was incredibly important and gave everybody identity and, uh, you know, uh, like intrinsic value as an individual within the content, which I think is something that the video game industry really struggles with, both in the manufacture of content, of game content, and in the editorial around game content. I think that people should get that moment to kind of put themselves beside what they're talking about a little
Hmm.
bit more, you
Okay.
know.
I would argue that that's
But
kind of what happens now, that it's kind of swung almost too far in the
well,
other direction, where it's more
now
about the
it's
the person now than the game.
what's happened now is everybody's got a channel, right? But
Hmm.
we had this beautiful, built-in family, that people
Hmm.
got to know, and we all appreciated it. But I appreciated it more than everybody because I knew how precious it was, and I was also having to do all the deals behind the scenes, and I knew how tenuous it was, and
Yeah.
I knew how precious it was.
Yep.
But I also have a recent um, anecdote about this as well. I just had David Jaffe on my podcast, on Vic's Basement, my podcast, and Jaffe reminds me a lot of Tommy Tellerico. He is
He is
a
very similar. You're right. Yeah.
no bullshit guy,
Yeah.
and he wants none of this, like putting people on pedestals BS.
Yeah.
He doesn't want the hero worship. He doesn't want it for himself. It makes him feel uncomfortable, and he doesn't want it for the rest of the game development community. He wants it to feel more like they're craftspeople and they have jobs to do, and it takes an army to build this stuff. And I, that I'm of a mind that we need to kind of know the individuals so we can have some familiarity with the humans, but also the work that it takes.
Hmm.
But that really struck me, and I think Tommy brought that into the content that he makes. And what I would say to your listeners is to, because I still get notes. I have people find our classic reviews and they say, "What the hell is Tommy thinking?" From 25
That's
years ago,
funny.
and people
Yeah.
still quote, underneath
Yeah.
the thing, "That guy knows bull. He's
Well, like
bullshit." And people
Smash
got
Brothers
so
was his big notorious one.
yeah.
Where he said
Oh
Smash
yeah.
Brothers
Well,
sucked,
I
and
didn't
he
like
gave it like
Smash
a 3
Brothers
out
when
of 10.
I didn't like it either when it first came out. Nintendo was
I
so
wasn't a big
pissed.
fan of it either, but I could appreciate what it was, and I could look beyond the fact that I didn't enjoy it to understand that other people are going to really, really like it. And
Yeah.
I think Tommy was just like, "It sucks, 3 out of 10." Like that's what I remember about it anyway.
Our challenge that particular week is I think we looked at a new Dead or Alive fighting game,
Oh
and then
yeah,
and then we had Smash
Smash.
Brothers,
Yep, that'll do
and
it.
so it was like, yeah, it was like, why does this exist? It was like it just didn't hit with us. It took me a few iterations of the game for me to kind of appreciate it
But
and
even
really
on the
fall in
show,
love with it.
you liked it a lot more than Tommy did.
Not on that particular episode.
I
We
thought you
both
did.
No, on the first one that we reviewed together, we both got a lot of hate mail. But
Okay.
what I encourage your listeners to do is to watch those reviews with Tommy, with the understanding that this guy had already had a decade in the business before I asked him to be on the show, and he'd
Yeah.
had all of this really cool insight. And Tommy's such a hustler that I don't think he likes to self celebrate, You know, like
Yeah.
he's
He's
good at
accomplished
that.
a lot. He should. It's
But he
amazing what he's done.
has, and that's
Yeah.
what's incredible. You know, I was playing Spider-Man because I've been doing a lot of retro stuff recently. I was
Mhm.
playing the Spider-Man PlayStation 1 game. And there's my brother, man. He's in the credits. He did all the music and sound
Yeah.
effects for the thing.
His
And
name
it's
pops
like,
up all the time.
yeah, and like I know him as a hardworking,
Yeah.
fun, crazy dude to kind of partner with and
Mhm.
kibitz with, but the guy doesn't stop, and he's done
Yeah.
a
He's
tremendous
done some amazing
amount.
stuff. Yep.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
let me talk about the reviews on the Run story, because what happened with Judgment Day is so Discovery Science really dug EP,
Uh-huh.
and so I went out there in August. I went out to Maryland in August of 2001, and I met with executives from all of their digital networks. It was me and a room filled with production people that were in charge of all the networks, and I pitched them Reviews on the Run as a half-hour show. We were going to take it out of EP. So back in 2001, we kind of had the idea because we knew people really liked that as a
Mhm.
segment, and I pitched them a show called Entertainment Tomorrow, and
Entertainment
Paramount was
tomorrow.
yeah, and
Not
Paramount
tonight.
was
Tomorrow.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it's funny because EP Daily really became what Entertainment Tomorrow was as a pitch is what EP Daily really evolved into, and when we went daily in 2008. But Discovery loved it. They loved the pitch. They loved the proposal, and I had a verbal green light. And so in August of 2001, I went home. We were going to have 3 half-hour shows with Discovery Science. We were going to own Friday nights. It was going to be our production company just cranking on all of these
Wow.
shows.
Big deal.
And it was amazing. And then 9/11 happened and everything changed. The
Yeah.
content in our 7th season had to be really adapted for this very sensitive, obviously sensitive marketplace out there. The viewership didn't want to see buildings exploding and
We were
half the
launching
shit that's
X-Play
in video
then,
games.
and we couldn't show people shooting guns.
Yeah.
We were supposed to
So
make a video game show without showing guns being fired.
so you're in that
Good
same boat.
luck with that.
Everybody was affected. Everybody
Yeah.
was, right?
Yep.
But it filtered into our video game content. All the executives kind of shifted their things. The guy that was in charge of Discovery Science said, "I'm," because there was a plane that dropped in Washington, right? So
Right.
close to home, close,
Yeah.
not far from where Discovery was.
They're still there,
And
actually, I think.
they're still there, yeah, and they
Yeah.
were amazing people to work with. But basically, everything changed, and everybody shifted internally, and then the appetite wasn't there, and so it was like, oh Christ, we're going to wrap up our season, and then who knows what's going to happen. And uh, somewhere in the course of us delivering those shows over those next 6 months, I met with Charles Hirschhorn, and we hit it off. And he apologized to me that he was
He's the
coming
head
up
of,
with this.
of G4, for those who don't know, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, and
Was.
and he said, I'm making a 24-hour network that's basically Electric Playground, but it's across 24 hours.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm
Help.
sorry, I'm doing that. I said, I said, I'm grateful and thank you for visiting. There's no way I'm building a network. This is amazing. And how do we work together? And so the first thing that we came up with was spinning Reviews on the Run as a show with them, but they wanted to call it Judgment Day.
Yep. And then that ran until 2005 on G4, correct?
Yeah, when XPlay came into the network, it was a question of like, we own these properties. We were already, I think, from the, I don't know what the executives were quite going through, but this was my read on it, is that they were still kind of struggling to find the audience and get the subscribers and keep their carriers happy. And they owned were airing 2 competing video game review shows, but they owned XPlay. And I think that was the decision, even though we rated well and
you did rate
people
well. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
people like to see both the shows.
I feel like that was misguided, in all honesty.
Oh, thanks, man.
Removing Judgment Day for some of the other shows that continued to air on the network. A lot of that stuff goes to talent contracts, that they had contracts with the talent for the other shows. And they're like, are we just going to cancel their show and pay their contracts out and then they're not working here anymore? There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes there. But as somebody who saw the ratings every week and saw how your show rated, and your show was different from XPlay. XPlay was like just straight down the line game reviews with sketch comedy. They were completely different shows. There honestly wasn't a ton of overlap in the audiences. There were XPlay fans and there were Judgment Day fans. And it was one of the top rated shows on the network. And I was like, why would you ever get rid of one of the top rated shows? It made no sense to me. Unfortunately, at that point in my career, I was not in a position of power, or I was completely powerless over anything that G4 did. But you know what? It didn't. You guys just shrugged it off because you kept producing the show. How many more years then did Reviews on the Run end up going? Judgment Day.
As a separate show, not only did we keep producing it, but we expanded it. We had this fantastic partnership that evolved with Rogers in Canada, who was carrying G4 Canada. And so they needed Canadian content, and they needed, and we were based in Canada, and so they needed a production company that was sort of experienced with this stuff and could speak to this audience. And so we kept rocking and rolling with Reviews on the Run until 2014 as a separate half hour. And not only did we keep rocking with it, it was our second daily show. So in 2008, we went daily with Electric Playground, which opened up a whole bunch of different avenues.
That's insane. The level of it was the ramp up there must have just been almost overwhelming.
It was amazing. It was exactly. It was a lot of work for sure. I don't want to diminish it, but it was exactly the trajectory that we should have been on to be on the air that much.
Because especially daily. So I left in 2006 and went over to MTV to work on game trailers. And almost as soon as I left, then X-Play went daily. And honestly, that was kind of the beginning of the end for that show. The show ended up creating another, 500 episodes or something like that. But the ratings at that point started falling off because it had lost some of its charm, because there was no way you could produce enough sketch comedy for a daily show.
You can't do that in the studio.
So
our secret sauce was
X-Play just became Entertainment Tonight for video games. And it kind of lost what made it special and what made people tune in to every episode. It made every episode, in all honesty, in some cases, like landmark episodes. So, I see where, one, I knew the people still who were working there, and they were telling me it was just grueling, just trying to getting enough content. It was hard enough when I was there, and we did 3 episodes a week, making sure we had enough games just to fill out those episodes. We're predominantly a review show, and we were reviewing every crappy little handheld game and just whatever we could, to make sure there was content for the episodes.
Yeah, and honestly, we your team and my team, or your ex team and my team, were facing the threat of all this new content that was being generated online, whether it was early video streams and whatever was happening. But I think we had 2 really great things in our corner, and we pivoted away from just thinking of ourselves as a video game show, and I think that. Video games were what EP was about. That was the heart and soul. It was very clear to see from every viewer there. But we really embraced this idea that we were bringing everybody on. We were bringing everybody in. We were family entertainment. Grandparents could sit down and watch the show. And as we went daily, we went even further into that. So we had more entertainment reporting. We were on junkets and set visits and
all that
red carpets and games were always the through line through all of that. And it was always the major chunk of the program. And I was nervous because, up until 2008, we had been this very focused video game program, and I didn't know for sure. But in my mind, I thought, this is what consumers are entertainment fans are doing now. They're carving up their time between games and movies and eventually streaming shows. Netflix loved working with EP because all of the traditional news magazines that were out there had rules that they couldn't cover Netflix because it was the competitor
competition.
To all the cable networks and all the studio broadcasters. But we could cover anything that was cool, everything cool every single day.
Again, going back to intelligently naming it Electric Playground instead of Gaming Playground or whatever.
And honestly, I called it that because I in my mind thought one day maybe we'll have a location, we'll have a physical space where people will come and they'll play and they'll learn about the business, and and I just thought that would be a great space.
Smart. Yeah. Was that the height of your business as far as Electric Playground, as far as number of employees, budget, all that kind of stuff?
Yep. We had a sustained sort of production budget. And then also we were really rocking with behind the scenes documentaries as well, because we were out in the field all the time.
Right.
So we were doing a lot of, we did the making of Arkham Asylum and the making of Metal Gear Solid 4. All of it just sort of fit in and clicked together and made a lot of sense. And it was rocking and rolling and working quite well. And so we evolved into that, and then G4 died, and it was like, oh shit.
Yeah. So 2014, G4 folds.
Yeah.
And that's also when Reviews on the Run, I guess that's when it ended its run, correct?
Yeah. Well, I knew that they were going to go, that it was going to fold in 2012. And I had one of the execs, I can't remember who
You knew
told
that
me.
G4 was going to fold in 2012?
Yeah. Yeah. And I knew I knew that it was bad for games. And I still think that it's bad for
Yeah,
games.
it is.
Games had an ESPN, you know,
Yeah.
they had this brand that could stretch across media to kind of focus all eyes. It's just like E3, like for these people that are running E3 to squander this opportunity for whatever reason. I don't know the details, but for the business and the E3 people to not see eye to eye to make this an incredibly important thing in North America is ridiculous.
It is.
And it's
Yeah.
very analogous to what happened with G4. And I hope that the new G4 can kind of find its way to bring everybody back together again, because I think there is still a place for well composed, interesting, intelligent, entertaining conversation around all of this stuff. And I knew that once G4 it became public that G4 was going away and all of these different sort of internal things became external, um, that it was going to be bad news for us. And that was really freaking hard for me, man. It was really hard. It was hard to let go of people because we'd been on this upward path for a very long time.
Yep. That's also
And
where
the internet was
YouTube just
happening.
really started taking over.
Exactly.
I mean, YouTube killed game trailers,
Yeah.
game trailers folded around the same time. And
Yeah, but what's so stupid is that the broadcasters could have just said, you know what, let's work with, especially when you're dealing with information. It's not like you can lock information. You can lock entertainment, and you can kind of get people to pay for entertainment, but information should be shared. And if you've got access to information, then you don't kind of put it behind a walled garden. And Viacom really struggled with that. It was insane. You
well, yeah,
you can't.
Viacom was suing YouTube for like $3 billion. So
It's
game trailers
crazy.
we didn't even have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I
When
know. I
YouTube is
remember all of that.
exploding,
Well,
it was
we
crazy.
had we had a deal with the broadcaster that wouldn't let us put our stuff online until a week after it had aired on TV. And we were a
Yep.
daily show. We're
Yeah.
talking about topical things with the news in it.
I
And
mean, we struggle
instead
with
of
that ourselves right now because we're supported by Patreon and our subscribers at sifted.net. And it's a very fine line to walk between, okay, how long is the right delay?
yeah,
Because if it's too long, your subscribers and your patrons are okay, but then the content isn't timely. If it's too short, your subscribers and your patrons get angry because they're like, what am I paying for this for if it's going up on YouTube 2 days later? So it's a
yeah.
tough line to walk. You alluded to the relaunch of G4. How do
Yeah.
you think that's going to go?
I don't know yet. I have had some discussions with them. I would like to find a way to work with them. I feel like we should, but I don't know if we're going to. I announced that there's no home for EP with them this year because everybody asks me every single day. And I pitched them something that I thought was, again, incredibly reasonable. Um, I do feel like people take it for granted a little bit what we did achieve with the programming. And I think part of it is we're out of Canada and also out of Vancouver, which isn't even in Toronto, which is where all of the Canadian
Right.
relationships are. Like, I think if we had done the same show out of Toronto, we probably would be on the air still, because TV is so
It's
up in
volatile. Yep.
it's incredibly volatile. And so G4 is going into that space. um
Do you think it
I
can work as it? I mean, because essentially it's
I
going to
think it
be a Twitch channel / YouTube channel at first. It
I think
may or
I
may
think
not come to linear TV later.
I I really wish I was working with them right now on more than just making them a show,
Mm-hmm.
because I learned a hell of a lot. And I don't want to be an executive. I want to be a person that's, at a network. I want to be a person that's uh building content and shepherding great talent and
Mm-hmm.
great conversation, and still being kind of like an ambassador out to a world that still shrugs its shoulders. Like, truthfully, so much content in games doesn't register or matter to people. And I think that's the secret to G4 succeeding. If they're just trying to sort of be an additive to what's already out there, they're going to get kind of washed away by the amount of choice that's available to people. But
Have
if
you
they
watched
are,
Venn at all?
I did, and I felt like there's a couple of I don't want to throw anybody because it's hard, and everybody's trying
Well,
to
it's a
figure it
small
out and make.
industry, and I can also
Yeah,
understand where you may want to work with them someday, so you don't want to be too critical about them. But do you
I
think
mean,
Venn is the blueprint for success for G4? Maybe that's a good way to phrase it.
no, and I
Yeah,
think part of it is the pandemic. I think the struggle to launch a network during a pandemic when people can't really get
it's tough.
together
Mm-hmm.
is really hard. But I also feel like don't cut off your demographic. Don't cut it off. And I felt like that's what G4 was doing, quite frankly, in the initial run, especially in retrospect.
Mm-hmm.
Like
When you
it
say cut off your
it
demo, do you think Venn was aiming too young?
yeah. I mean they're looking for this and I worry that G4 might be doing this too, this kind of sweet spot where they're hip and cool and they know they're really smart and they get all of this and they love it and they're pure, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to like fuck, let everybody in on the boat, let everybody in.
Do you think
Don't
that maybe part of it is just I think maybe TV execs believe that no one wants to see older folks like us on television or in this
well
type of content.
that's endemic across media in general, but the truth of it is that
But
the
they're forgetting
demo.
that a lot of gamers are our age, right?
Well, and it's not even gamers, man. Like it was a profound thing to go from a cable network, which is where we sort of grew to, and even in Canada, we were on the Space Channel here, and we were on MTV Canada and G4 Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But then to flip the dial, and then we were on regular broadcast stations that you didn't even need a cable
Yeah, you get with
connection to
rabbit
watch,
ears. Yeah.
and we were on every night at 11 o'clock against the local news in all of the cities across the country. It was every day. So it was a very profound thing for me to have this kind of awareness from a certain crowd to walking down the street anywhere in Vancouver or Calgary or Toronto or whatever. And every age knew who I was. If you're not creating content in that direction and you have the budget and the people and the resources to do that, and you're just trying to get the hip people that like a Twitch stream, you
I think
you're
good
gonna
luck with
you're
that.
gonna be in
Yeah.
trouble. You're
Well, I
gonna
think
be in trouble.
if you're aiming for linear television, which I don't even know if that's really the right decision for the new G4 or Venn. I don't know if that's the right decision for any production at this point is to aim for linear television, even though the profit margins there are much bigger than they
Yeah.
are in digital. But so you're saying that maybe these shows should try to be a little more casual and appeal to a wider market.
I
If
don't think you don't put labels on it. You just make
yeah,
content that's good,
but
that
the
any like
problem, Victor, is that there's so much content out there now. It's like when I was working on X Play and you were working on Judgment Day at G4, there weren't
yeah.
that many options, particularly for content around games that had a big budget and was really polished. Now,
Yes.
a kid with a couple $1,000s, he can produce stuff that looks real good, man. He can get his monthly
Oh yeah, for
Adobe
sure.
Premiere subscription and
And
he
you
can
have
make
to
stuff that
factor
looks as
that into
good
your
as what we
budgets.
made. Yeah,
You have to factor that into your budgets, but what isn't being made are very quick and easy to digest, especially in this space, magazine shows that really don't waste people's time and give them a lot to kind of chew on and give people a lot of entry points in to be entertained and surprised. And that's the secret. I keep hearing people don't want to watch TV on the internet or on YouTube.
mm-hmm.
I think they really do. And I think, NBC is proof positive of that. NBC's been making a fortune with their YouTube videos that they post on there, whether it's SNL clips or the MSNBC clips or whatever. And that's just YouTube, right? Like people have unlimited choice, so don't give them, don't reflect that back. Cut it down and be incredibly shrewd, but be inclusive. And that's the secret. Give them something of real value that doesn't waste their time, and I just make it good. I think
Do
that's
you
the
think
real secret.
do you think experience is valued in our profession as far as the audience is concerned. Do you think that the audience cares that you and I have been reviewing games for 20 plus years? Or do you think they care more about the guy who just started his new YouTube channel but looks like them and is closer to their age?
I think all of that is true.
Because you don't get
Um,
it doesn't seem like there's a Siskel and Ebert for video games, is what I'm getting at. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a thirst for that type of content like there is for other
well,
entertainment mediums.
it would take either a very well put together partnership from the get go, where everything was kind of shared in that relationship and that partnership, and whatever kind of production elements were put into place, if that was all thinking like that, and getting to a point of making content to appeal to a lot of people. So it'd be a road to go down. And YouTube and Twitch don't really engender that. I think a lot of the teams that exist in that space that maybe have Patreon deals and things like that come from television or some kind of team-based narrative in terms of showing people how to do this with a collective. You look at Kind of Funny or Easy Allies, and there's a few other groups out there that have figured out how to all leave together and start something fresh. And those kind of reflect a little bit in that venue. So I think there is an appetite for that real discussion. And I think to get to that, and I always encourage this with friends that are out there that are content creators that really work together, is to just, create that partnership and make it about friendship and make it about trust and respect, and see how long you can go, and how far you can go, but have a great time with it, because I think on the other side, and you probably know this too, is that there's a loneliness with this constant putting of material out there, with the reflection that we both come from this sort of group dynamic and working with a lot of people. And we can still get that in the content that we make on interviews and things like that. But there's something else. There's another element that I think it's incumbent on companies like Venn and G4 to really establish, and any television production out there, is to really spend the money to find a good assemblage of people to build something of real value there. Don't just replicate and try to kind of make the the TV friendly living room version of what everybody's already watching, and try to fake that. I think you should
Which I would
endeavor
argue
to,
is what Venn has been.
yeah. Well, and I think by virtue of the fact that they've had to produce and launch based on dates in the middle of a pandemic, I think
Yeah,
they've
it doesn't
done,
help.
yeah, I think they've done as good as they can. Plus, it hurts, I think, to be based out of LA. To be, I just think it does, because and this is what people at G4 told me back in the day, is your budgets are pitted against what everybody else in town is paying, and if you don't have the ad dollars or the subscription to justify those expenses, I think budget definitely comes into play.
Yeah.
And you need to hire people that aren't just phoning the job in. It's not just a gig, right? And there's a lot of that in LA. There's a lot of that in Vancouver. There's a lot of it in all of the major hubs out there.
I mean, that's how entertainment works. Let's be honest. G4
Yeah.
was an anomaly that we were a family. Like, the team that worked on X Play, we were all best friends. When we got off work, we went out drinking together. Like, it wasn't like we were all just these guns for hire that showed up to
Yeah.
work and then went to this other gig that we did in some other part of LA and some other unrelated sort of entertainment field. We worked together every day, all day. And even when we were done working all day together, we still wanted to spend time with each other afterwards. And you're right, that does come through in the content. And I feel like, at least in Venn in particular, I think the way they approached it was, hey, how many followers do each of these people have on social media? We add them all up. If we get 15% of their people showing up, that's a high rating. And it just doesn't really work that way, because you're right. You don't have that sort of family feeling in the content where these people are legitimately tight with each other and vibe off of each other in a natural way.
Yeah.
And I think that is one thing that YouTube has done, is it has taught the viewer how to spot that, how to spot the fake, and how to figure out if these people really like each other, really vibe off of each other, or if they've just been thrown together as kind of this potpourri of talent or social media followings, and trying to generate an audience from it. So I think there's been a lot of good that's come out of things like YouTube and Twitch, but I also think it's made it inherently more difficult for operations like G4 and Venn to succeed.
Yeah.
Because you're right, with the way the production model works in LA in particular, that's just not how it is. Nobody is like full time. Nobody is like coming into the office at 8 in the morning and leaving at 7 p.m. That's just not how it works here anymore. And I think it is counterproductive to creating content that this new audience really will care about. So
Yeah, I mean the only way to overcome that is to be really focused on the direction of the show, and to make
yeah,
something really special. If a show like The Queen's Gambit can come out and be just a blockbuster around the world,
yeah,
I believe that good programming about anything can come out and be very successful,
agreed. You can make a show about
right?
chess that everybody wants to watch.
And there's
Yeah,
honestly a million different examples of that. What there isn't a million of is good programming that's really focused and smartly put together. And I honestly believe that by narrow casting it just to games, you're also, and this is coming from a true blue guy that
yeah,
bleeds, nerd juice.
pixels.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, I bleed pixels. Yeah, like I love this industry and I love video games, but I feel like the best way to communicate around games is to pit them right beside everything else that people consume, except for the garbage, gossipy shit. There's
right.
enough of that. You don't need to throw that into your game coverage. You need to throw the beautiful craftsmanship, the artistry of movies and television and comics and all these other things that draw people's fascination and attention. And you put games right beside that. That's what EP became, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that, brother. Like it took me a long time to learn that. And when I saw the ratings, like one of the amazing things about our syndication deal, when we were making EP Daily, and we had these distributors that were a good job at placing us, didn't do a good job at bringing in revenue, mostly also because a lot of ad dollars were shifting to YouTube, and also
Mm-hmm.
we were, an independent production company. We weren't owned by Paramount or whatever. But I saw that people were watching the show and it was rating well, and then more people would be with the show in its second 15 minutes. And that meant that we were drawing people. They didn't know
You're
who I
building.
was. They didn't know,
Yeah.
yeah, they didn't know what EP was. They didn't know, but what they saw was like the coolest shit that people make, and people that were really into it and really having a good time being able to communicate that stuff. And I think that has real cachet and real value. And I think it should be smeared. I think that you definitely need to hit all of the distribution avenues that exist in with social video, but it should be on television for as long as TV exists, and and so yeah, I would love to work with these people that saw me more than as a guy that made a show before, or as a
Well, I certainly
Canadian.
view you in that light. I
Yeah.
see you as much more than just a guy who hosted a TV show. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, I think I'm out of sight, out of mind a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing too I've been thinking about this is like, why wouldn't you want to work with a turnkey solution on getting you stuff that people like right away?
Yeah.
Um, Part of it, I think, too, is that I have been hustling for this last 5 years too, and I've got a lot of new content out there, and it's a different,
You've adapted your
model.
style as well to the
Yeah,
changing
it's
times. Yeah.
totally. But I've been so busy with building stuff that I don't think people have been able to, the people that really like the content haven't been able to miss me, because here I am, I'm making new stuff still because
Yeah.
I'm passionate about it. And I think that's been part of what G4 has been wanting to do as well, is to kind of bring stuff back that people haven't seen in a little while. And, because I've definitely been reflecting on it. It's like, well, why I, they have their own things that are going on, which I don't envy. It's not
I just
easy to
wonder how
to
long that
build all this.
nostalgia play will sustain is my big question. It's like the first
Well,
week,
exactly.
sure. Hey, here's Kevin and maybe Olivia doing Attack of the Show again. Hey, here's Adam doing X Play again. But ultimately, it's going to be the shows that bring them
Yeah.
back again for week 2 and week 3 and on and on and on. So,
And the only, I saw this with X Play a little bit too, especially as it went daily, is that there was a lot of what was the rumor site? Right now it's Reset Era, but what was it back then?
NeoGaf back then.
Yeah, I felt like X Play was like in a competition with NeoGaf in terms of
Yeah.
trying to break stuff. And I thought, even then, I was like, why? You're a TV show. Don't try to beat the internet. Make
Well,
a
I think they
show.
saw internet video kind of eating their lunch at that point. And they were trying to figure out a way to sort of stem the tide and be relevant. And I think that's why they went daily in the first place, was because they're like, we can't compete with these guys if we're only doing 3 shows a week, because this stuff is happening at a breakneck pace now. And so I understood why they did it, but I do agree that I think the approach was maybe a little off.
Yeah. I mean,
it was obviously because it didn't succeed, so it didn't work.
You know, I think there were other things that factored into what happened with us, because Rogers was very happy with the programming as well, but they spent billions of dollars on hockey rights for broadcast right around the time that we actually had this is so funny. We had an EP radio running. We had a minute spot on the radio every day talking about some of the cool things that we were covering in the show. And I got a call one day from the radio station saying, "Yeah, we need to get that minute back from you guys, because we got to put a hockey minute into the show."
That's TV though. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was in an edit bay and they're like, "We got to shave 45 seconds off of this because the lead in is a little longer and more people are watching the lead." And you're literally like shaving frames off of like stand-ups and whatever to get those seconds back that you need. It's just
that's invaluable experience for you though, brother, because you were not only making the content, you were really understanding how it all left the creative space and actually got to the
business space.
And into the business space and dealing with all of the carrier approvals. And I know that there was always
you learn how to cut content to the quick. Seriously, like you start to figure out where you can shave a second here, a second there really quickly on a show that a producer worked on for 2 days and felt like every second that was left in there mattered. And after you do it for a while, you can go in there and you can find a second here, there, boom, boom. We're down to like whatever 21:30 now that we needed to get to for this other bump for this lead. It's just, you learn, and people
and people look back at television timing with I think
it's absurd now.
Well, it is absurd. And I think, a huge chunk of the attraction of internet video was that the freedom of time, and people could just keep going and you could make anything that you wanted. But now there's so much of it. And there's so many ways that people can just be consumed with watching. I think the novelty of having some time restrictions would be well received, especially in this space. The
algorithm plays a lot on YouTube, how you get sucked into one topic, and then there's all the recommended videos there that take you down the rabbit hole for good things and for bad things.
Well, and that's the other thing too. I think YouTube is quite complicit in the their apathy and their lack of kind of really choosing a direction for how editorial gets served up on their services.
They don't care about any of that. All they care about is that you watch the next video, so they serve another ad. I mean,
and they should, because they have this mass amount of eyeballs, and look at how many times it's bit them in the ass.
They have a lot of responsibility, to be honest.
Yeah, and look at all of these idiots that have
that next viewing experience. It's a lot of power for a media company to hold.
And they should be, not only, I think, more empathetic to that power and smarter with it, but they should be working with these content creators to help them make their best stuff as well. Not just in terms of how it's going to monetize best, but also like bring real value into a viewer's experience with all of this,
Agreed.
Like they are making so much money that they should not be apathetic about it. They should be very,
proactive,
very proactive and smart, and they should be arbiters. They should be like, they should be tastemakers in a way, and pick the right bets.
They want everything to be automated, though. They don't want to have to pay human beings to do anything there. That's just the way that's the way a lot of companies are,
It's very demographic,
content.
It's democratic. It's very,
some people don't want human beings doing this stuff because they're like, oh, well, what does that person believe? Are they going to, impart their beliefs into how they're doing the job? Like it's such a slippery slope anymore. Letting humans do anything. It's like everybody wants robots to do stuff now.
Well,
Because they're
that's
like,
my
if
great.
you have a human do it, then their biases come into play, and we don't want that. So
That's my great fear with all of this automation. Are we going to end up? It's robots making games for robots. Is that what this is all going to lead?
it's possible.
And then making TV shows hosted by robots for robots.
It is possible. It does feel sometimes like we're headed in that direction. That's for sure. Well, look, even with our open format, we do eventually have to close out the show. And to close out every episode of 3-Night Weekend, we ask every guest, what are they playing? What are they watching? And what are they drinking this weekend?
Oh, okay. Oh man, I can't pronounce the whiskey. I was drinking Robert Burns whiskey.
Okay.
My wife and I are big fans of Outlander, and every episode of Outlander they have a wee dram, and and we love Scotland. We've been to Scotland a few times, and we love it over there. And there's actually a new show with the guy from Outlander. Two of the stars from Outlander, they tour through Scotland, and so that's become a bit of a weekly tradition. We'll sit down and have. We just got this new scotch that I can't even pronounce, but Robert Burns whiskey I can, and it's very nice. In terms of games that I'm playing, I am playing Cyber Shadow like crazy on the Nintendo Switch. That's going to be probably the next thing that I actually put some thoughts into a video and review. I've been playing the Neo Geo Pocket Color, and I'm going to be downloading Monster Hunter Rise right now. So yeah, I'm always. There's always a bunch of games in rotation. And what was the last one?
What are you watching this weekend?
What am I watching? Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Absolutely love it. And I guess Men in Kilts is the show that I watch with my wife.
Great. And Vic, where can people find you? Where can they find you on Twitter, your YouTube channel, all that sort of stuff?
Okay, well, on Twitter, it's Victor_Lucas. And on YouTube, our YouTube channel is EPN TV. So it's youtube.com/EPN TV. And our show and Electric Playground info page is epn.tv.
All right, Victor, I literally could have talked to you about the industry for another 2 hours. I really could. It's always fascinating to speak with you about this because your experience is so vast and so varied. But unfortunately, we have to close it out. But thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate it. Now that Vic has let you in on his weekend plans, it's time to figure it out for yourself.
Games!
Finally, people, there are some big games to play this weekend. Actually, a couple big games. Actually, 3 big games to play this weekend. Can you even believe it after the dry spell we've been going through in March? First up, Monster Hunter Rise, the brand new Monster Hunter game. It is a Switch exclusive, built for the Switch, I would add. It looks and plays great. Initial reviews have been sky high. Next up, It Takes Two, the next game from Joseph Fuck the Oscars Fares, is yet another clever cooperative game. Again, for this game, reviews sky high, 9.0 Metacritic right now. Pretty shocking to be honest, though I did draft it in my video game fantasy league, so I'm pretty happy about that. And next up, a third big game coming out this weekend, Balan Wonderworld, which is a brand new game from Yuji Naka. Wasn't too impressed with that with the beta that we played, but we only got to play a slice of the game, so we're hoping that maybe as we get deeper, it will get better. And also, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 launches for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles this weekend. And then finally, JRPG Octopath Traveler launches for Xbox platforms.
TV and film!
A little bit of a slow weekend for TV and film, but with all those games, who's going to be watching any of this stuff anyway? First up, The Irregulars Season 1 launches on Netflix. It's set in the Sherlock Holmes universe, and it focuses on a bunch of street kids who solve street crimes. Certainly a more modern twist on an old IP. Next up, The Mighty Ducks Game Changers Season 1 debuts on Disney+. The show actually doesn't follow the Mighty Ducks because the Mighty Ducks have turned into a bunch of scumbags. They have become sort of the epitome of the competitive youth sports culture, and the show focuses on a group of players who break away from the team to start their own squad. Next is Bad Trip, which is a movie that debuts on Netflix. It's a road trip comedy starring Eric Andre. And then finally this weekend, Tina, a biopic about the popular singer Tina Turner, launches on HBO Max.
Music!
Not a lot of mainstream releases this weekend as far as albums are concerned, but some pretty good indie stuff. First up, Juju, which is actually one of Ryan Stevens from Game Trailers Days' favorite bands, It has a new album this week called Oh No. They're very hard to describe. They're dark and strange and experimental, but if you're a fan of a lot of other indie bands, there are guest appearances up and down the track list on this album. One thing I would say about this group is some songs are amazing and some songs can be hard to listen to, but certainly something unique and probably something like you've never heard before. Next up, a band called Floating Points. They haven't released an album in a really long time, and the new album is called Promises, and it's actually kind of a fusion of their music, which is like downbeat, mellow, electronic stuff, kind of like The Orb, and jazz. In fact, some huge jazz musicians are playing on this. It is getting really high reviews from critics. They're calling it the most relaxing album maybe ever released. So if you need something to kind of kick back to, Floating Points Promises is probably a good pick. And then finally, if you're looking for something a little more hard driving from your music this weekend, the new album from Death From Above called Is For Lovers launches today. If you're a fan of the White Stripes and kind of that stripped down rock sound, they're also a two-piece, just guitar and drums, although their songs are a little more produced than what you get from the White Stripes, but the songs also have tons of hooks. Highly recommended.
Sports.
All right, this weekend in sports, tonight at 10:05 Eastern, it's the Hawks versus the Golden State Warriors on ESPN, and that is pretty much the only sports stuff happening today, which is good because there's several great games you should be playing instead. Moving on to Saturday, on ESPN2, the FIFA World Cup 2022 qualifying is going on pretty much all day long. Just a little preview of what you're going to get here in a couple years at the next World Cup. Then March Madness kicks up once again on CBS and TBS. It's been an interesting tournament. A lot of the big schools have been eliminated already. I think it just goes to show that the way the season was this year, the conference tournaments and the regular season really wasn't a great determinant on which of the teams were the best across the entire NCAA. And then if you're into hockey and bad hockey, the NHL Network has two back-to-back games that are set in basically the Canadian division, which is the Northern Division. At 7 p.m., the Leafs take on the Oilers, and then right after that, the Flames take on the Jets. Moving on to Sunday, more March Madness on CBS and TBS, and then at noon, the Rangers take on the Capitals on NBC if you want to watch some hockey. And then at 3 p.m. on NBC, the WGC Dell Technologies Match Play Finals. If you want to watch some golf, it's happening then. And then the Devils take on the Bruins at 5:30 p.m. on NBCSN if you want to cap the night with some more pucks. And then at 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. on Fox Sports 1, it's the 2021 CONCACAF Olympic Qualifying Championship.
Esports.
Not a bad weekend for esports. In fact, it's a big weekend for Rocket League. There are 3 major tournaments within RLCS going down across the weekend. And then Rainbow Six Siege, the North American League that unites the U.S. and Canada, is happening, and that's a $125,000 purse. And then lastly, the Overwatch Contenders Season 1, which is kind of like the B League, the first cut below the best players, is happening this weekend. But the purse isn't really second layer. The purse for this tournament is $175K. Big money in esports, man. All right, thanks for checking out 3 Night Weekend on Sifted Games at sifted.net. A huge thanks to Victor Lucas for taking some time out of his busy schedule to speak with me. If you want to get it when it's hot and fresh, head to patreon.com/sifted and give us a pledge. If you give us $4 a month or more, you'll get this every Friday morning. If you want to know when the show is posted for free, follow us on Twitter at Sifted Games. And if you want to reach out to me and suggest future guests, you can find me at Dinfire. I'm Shane Satterfield reminding you that every weekend is a 3 Night Weekend.